Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I needed that applause because I don't know why Ambassador Surendra Kumar keeps embarrassing me by calling me to events where there are far more distinguished people than me and far more knowledgeable person than me. And then he embarrasses me even further by asking me to speak at the end where I've almost lost any points that I can add of value.
This is protocol, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador.
You are only serving.
Ambassadors on the stage and ladies and gentlemen. Pardon me for often referring to my notes while I'm speaking on this subject, because it's a subject as far more complex than my experience can handle, and already the speakers before me have outlined the complications that involve in this. Let me just give a short introduction. I'm from a part of the country which has seen terrorism and insurgency backed by foreign elements, and we've seen the damage and havoc that it can cause. I also have traveled to Pakistan and have friends in Pakistan. I'm an Indian, and for me, national security, law and order, and a nation free from terrorism is of utmost importance. I agree with largely what the panelists before me have spoken on. But I'm still perturbed, and this is a point that Ambassador Sybil referred to. How do you define good neighborly relations? Can we say today that India and China are good neighbors? There is a level of competition. There is frequent disturbances at the border. And at a geopolitical level, we seem to be on opposite sides. At the same time, when it comes to people relationship, there is a high level of, let's say, ignorance about each other's cultures, and our people-to-people visits are very limited. Contrast that with Pakistan. We've talked about government-to-government relationships, army-to-army relationships, our relationship between our industry. But the people-to-people relationship is very different from the relationship that the Indian and Chinese community have in Asia or outside. Do we want to, from a pragmatic level, at least reach the stage where the India-China relationship is, where we have a certain element of distrust, a certain level of competition, but at the same time, there will be areas where we can collaborate on. I approach this subject with a level of pragmatism, but a romantic at heart. The army, of course, is a key stakeholder. And what I foresee today in my opening remarks is how I see Indian politicians or Indian political parties taking this subject further. Yes, there has been muddling in the past, but if I were to crystal gaze into the future, I see Indian politicians and Indian political parties being more hard in their approach and being far more assertive in their approach. Not with the intention of creating disturbance in the region, but with the intention to show that our ultimate objective is peace and security. We will lean far more on our Indian diplomatic corps to look at avenues of reducing military support to Pakistan from the US administration. With the changing global scenario in Afghanistan, I foresee that India might step up its role and try to attempt to undermine Pakistan's influence, and one of the main reasons of how it gets military aid from the US. We will also try to identify how come the Pakistani army has such far public support within Pakistan. A Pew report from 2016, I believe, rates the Pakistani army as the most trusted institution in Pakistan. There's a high level of public support. The Pakistani society, as per the Pew report, trusts the army much more than the Supreme Court. Obviously, politicians are far below that, and that's the case in India as well. But we will try to understand this large public support that the Indian army that the Pakistani army has, and try to find ways of managing it. Thirdly, I feel on a military level, there will be a time when India will show its military superiority, whether in terms of scale or size. How that display of military superiority comes, that would only be guided by our trusted generals. But I think that signal is important, and a signal which is measured, which is backed not only by talk, but also by action. It is important to communicate that to Pakistan society as well, that a military conflict is in no means useful for the region, and what is more important for us is economic growth. We also have to make, when we are communicating in the world and with Pakistani society and civilians, make the Indian economic model and the Indian governance model that much more aspirational, where there's a separation between the army and the state, where our focus is on poverty alleviation and creating jobs and new industries. Let us try to find a way of working far more on industry to industry, private sector cooperation, also on confidence building measures in development. Both nations face similar problems when it comes to rural poverty, women empowerment, water security. And while there have been confidence building measures in the past when it comes to our two armies, I believe there's far more collaboration that we can do on development as well. We must engage our other sectors of Pakistan and Indian society, must engage with each other. Lastly, there will always be the politicians, the community of people that I represent, and will continue to be much more assertive and less dovish in our approach. There will be, as you can already see in recent election statements, much more hyperbole and much more noise on the relationship between our two countries. How do we ensure that our diplomats can work in silence and we reduce the noise and we reduce the temperature? I think that we will need the advice of far more distinguished people who are there, who are present in this room. But I do agree that there needs to be less hyperbole and less noise, but I don't see it happening. Towards the end, Ambassador Sybil referred to Kashmir, and it was an eloquent description by our very veteran journalist Saeed Naqvi Saab, that there's a triangle at play here, at India-Srinagar, Hindu-Muslim, and India-Pakistan. And that triangle needs to become a circle where we eventually end up where we started from, where we were one civilization. There are other stakeholders as well, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, but there are far more distinguished experts on this table who can tell us how to manage this relationship. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't mean to be an alarmist, I mean to be a pragmatist, and if you're trying to misquote me, I'm just saying that I was having a dream and I was just recounting what I said today. Thank you very much.